Hello, everybody. Welcome to the AskPiesNation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. My name is Nicholas Sacco, your host for another episode 29 of season 5, or episode 142, if you're counting from the beginning. It's prelim final week, and we have a huge task ahead of us on Friday night. The informed Giants are coming to town, but we couldn't be more pumped to see what our boys have in store as we look to book a grand final spot. We'll preview this prelim final in detail, what GWS will bring to the table, and how we can go about it in terms of stopping their incredible momentum-filled run. We get the fans' thoughts as well on AskPiesNation, and talk a little bit of AFLW following the weekend before we get our famous Monday headlines going. And joining me in the studio to chat all things Giants and Pies today, it's Luke and Jack. Boys, welcome. Were we thrilled or a bit nervous after seeing Saturday night and what GWS were able to produce?
Definitely nervous, Nico. That was a clinic that they put on against the Power on Saturday night. A lot's got to be said about a relatively young side having a mature win like that, and they kept Port at arm's length for most of that game, had a really brilliant second quarter, and I think if you go back and watch it, you probably find as much as the commentary's been around Port's missed opportunities, I think the Giants equally missed their opportunities to really put that game to bed. And yeah, scary coming into this week for sure. I think it's gone from being probably, a 70-30 chance Collingwood's way to more like a 50-50, I think, is the way it's got to be on form. So yeah, really keen to get to Friday night, Lukey.
Yeah, it was a weird one because I was actually going for the Giants. I was happy to see Port go out, but it's getting to the point now where we start thinking about the outcome of that win, and we look towards Friday night, and now we've got to play them, and they're probably the most informed side going at the moment, so it's going to be a huge one. 90,000 plus Collingwood fans, though. It's going to be pretty special on
We all
Friday
got our
night.
tickets, I assume, all ready to go.
It's a tough fight this morning for us, but we got there. We'll hopefully fill out the MCG with black and white.
Yeah, I can't wait. If it's anything like that Freo final last year, where it was decked out with all Collingwood supporters, are going to be absolutely amazing. We'll get stuck into what this prelim is going to mean, because I felt like the mentality of a lot of Collingwood supporters coming into Saturday was actually hoping Port Adelaide would win, just because it seemed like the easier feat. And apart from the first 15 minutes of the game on Saturday, it was all the Giants. They just swarmed that Port Adelaide side, really put them behind the eight ball. And since then, it was the Giants all the way through. A brilliant performance away from home. They have the shorter break now, travelling to the MCG this week. But what have we made of GWS, I guess, not just for Saturday night's game, but the whole year? Because, they started really poorly. At 15th, I think they were at one point in the home and away campaign, and they turned things around. A really strong back half to the season, and they were able to sneak into the finals in the end, and have since produced two really strong finals wins. We beat them pretty comfortably here at the G earlier this year, but a completely different ballgame, as we know, this week. But yeah, what have you made of the Adam Kingsley side? Wow.
Yeah, well, they've been exceptional. I think fairly similar to Port Adelaide earlier in the year, the team that we beat in round 2 by 60-odd points. I think we beat the Giants by a similar margin when we played them. Not the same team, obviously, coming up. They've had a very, very strong refresh, as I hate to say it, as of someone like Carlton. Very, very similar tones, Nico. It hurts to say that. But yeah, they've just been really good. They're playing with no fear, nothing to lose. And I think what's happening now is you're starting to realise, like, folks like Lockie Whitfield, Stephen Coniglio, Toby Green, all these relatively senior heads are finding form again, and then they've got this plethora of young talent behind them. Callum Brown springs to mind, Connor Iden, they've been exceptional.
Tom Green was exceptional.
Both ends for them this year. So yeah, they're a scary prospect, and understandably people are going to draw comparisons to 2019, and I think it's a lot different because I think they beat the Bulldogs in 2019 and then played Brisbane up there in a game that Brisbane probably shouldn't have lost, and then got us, and it's got to be said we probably had one foot in the door of a grand final and not really focusing too much on the prelim of that week. But I think the biggest thing I'm drawing confidence from this year is from our side of things, is that Craig McRae is very much, his mantra this year has been around staying present, staying in the moment, managing the minutes very well. And I think, we understand that the consequences of prelims means that you're going to be playing a grand final or your season's going to be done. But I think with Craig McRae at the helm, we're going to be focusing on the ball as it comes and not looking too far ahead.
Yeah, they've had it. It'll be 15 days by the time it comes around. I think, yeah, like you said, it's a very different situation to 2019. We kind of just expected to walk through and be there on grand final day. And I think, yeah, with Craig McRae at the helm, it's a very different different vibe at the club, and the focusing on every day, take every day as it comes. There's no guarantees for everything. And you only have to look back to last year, and we probably walk into that prelim thinking, oh, we're a really good chance. Like we're getting away with all these wins this year. It's just going to happen again. And unfortunately, it didn't happen that day. And I think the hurt of last year is going to drive, especially for the boys that were out there on the field last year, drive them this Friday night to know there's no guarantees. You're just going to get there. And a lot of them, particularly the more senior players, could be thinking this might be their last opportunity to get there on grand final day. So,
and we'll talk about our preparation in a bit more detail shortly in the lead up to Friday. But do you feel like this is going to be a game where we just set out to try and quash those demons from 2019? You mentioned that preliminary final earlier. It's 4 years ago now, and don't get me wrong, it was a horrible day to witness. It was cold, wet, and nothing just went our way. I'm not going to even go through the selection because I'm still mad about it. But anyway, nothing went our way that day, and at the end, didn't deserve to get to the grand final after a performance like that. Still a few of those players on the list now. I don't know if it's got a similar inkling to it. It doesn't feel like it. 2019, yes, we had a terrific year, top four again, and a nice preliminary final win, but we weren't the best team in the competition. There wasn't as much pressure on us then as there is right now. We've had the 15-day break, as you mentioned, Lukey, and, yes, the Giants have been in terrific form, but there's no reason to suggest why we can't go ahead and win comfortably. Is it more about stamping our feet and trying to end what happened in 2019, or is this just a new era?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I think back in 2019, it was almost surprising that we found ourselves in a prelim. I think if you go back and look at our form in the back half of that year, it was a few heavy losses to the Giants, to Hawthorn, who weren't going very well at that stage. And we sort of fell into a top four position and then beat Geelong in the first week of finals, and found ourselves in a prelim all of a sudden. And you get yourselves on the soft side of the draw. You beat you're coming up against the Giants, who no one expected them to be in a prelim. So again, your whole mentality is that, as you said, Nico, you just thought it was going to be a formality and you were just going to make it. And comparing that side to this side, I think this side is far more settled. You've mentioned selection. I think there's no real sort of headaches about who's going to play this week. It's very much unfortunate news about Tay Adams, but I think with the news that Nick Dacos is going to be available, he comes straight back in, and that's sort of the end of it. I'm sure we're going to get to that later. But yeah, it just seems it's got a lot more settled feeling, and it feels like we're meant to be here this time. I feel like in 2019 it was a bit of not a flash in the pan because we'd made a grand final the year before, but it just felt like, oh, shivers, we're here, surprise, we're red hot favourites, we're just going to make a grand final. This year it feels like we've had a really, really strong year form-wise. We had a great game against Melbourne last Thursday 2 weeks ago. We feel better prepared, and I feel like that's just going to set that up alongside, all the great teachings of Craig McRae, who's the real life Ted Lasso, Lukey.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying there. And we spoke earlier off air about 2019 and how we probably would have ended up getting pumped by Richmond the next week anyway. So that speaks to how well we were actually going. I remember that Geelong qualifying final. It didn't feel convincing at all, that win, even though we did get over them. And then, straight through to a prelim, and God, that was an ordinary day. I don't feel as tortured by that day as a lot of fans I've seen over social media posting about it. Obviously, you boys feel a bit as well, but to me, I kind of forgot about that day until the last few days when everyone started bringing it up again. And but to me, as a supporter, and I think for the players in the playing group and coaching group, it's a completely, even though there are some of the same boys that were there that are at the club now, it's a completely different playing group, playing list, different vibe completely. So I don't think it'll play much of an effect.
And GWS are a completely different team from that day as well. You think about all the players they had in that side that have moved on to different clubs or have retired since. No Shane Mumford trying to torment us like he did back then as well.
Mason.
Yeah, pushing it back. Grundy, oh my God, that lives in my head.
Well, even like not having Grundy there for us, that's he was our number one player at that point in time. Now he won't even be at the club he's gone to soon. So.
Well, one man that didn't play that day but has been absolutely incredible for the Giants since is the All-Australian captain, Toby Green. Another inspirational performance from him in that final against Port Adelaide. Kicked their first 2 goals of the game and was able to pretty much be another match winner for him throughout that night. It's a simple question here, boys. How do we stop his influence on Saturday night? Because he's going to be one player that everybody will look to target. I know the Giants will be relying on him to get the job done as well, but who do we put on him to try and stop, and how do we quell his influence?
I think it's the man that made the 44-man All-Australian squad, Isaac Quainer, Nico. I think he rates himself, and we rate him as one of the best number one defenders, small defenders in the comp, with not too many times that he's been towed up, but I think one of those times that I can remember at least is against this man, Toby Green. So a huge test for him. I think he goes to him. But I also feel like you can't be too Toby Green centric, as much as he's a barometer for them and he can take a game away from you. You only have to look at this Port game where someone like a Jesse Hogan gets off the leash, or even a Toby Bedford, who I thought was extremely strong as well. You know, these types can kill you. Brett Daniels as well, who's had an immense year. So although Toby Green is going to be a factor in this game, you can't get too Toby centric because they do have a lot of other boys that can nip you in the butt for sure.
I was going to say Maynard, but I agree. It's going to have to be a strong team defensive effort because they do have a very, very open forward line. And if you do shut down Toby, you're going to unleash a few other of the boys out there. And like you said, Hogan had an exceptional game on Saturday night and can easily tear it apart. Riccardi, a young forward, but he's another one that can completely tear the game apart. So they do have a lot of options up there, and really they don't have many faults across the whole field. So it is quite a scary proposition.
Yeah, I mean, you even look at someone like Stephen Coniglio, who had it's probably the best game I saw him play on Saturday night and was able to hit the score sheet too. They don't have many weaknesses, I agree. One thing I think we can try and exploit on Friday night, assuming it all goes to plan in that sense, is obviously their ruckman Kieran Briggs suffered an injury, so he's in a bit of doubt for Friday night. If he doesn't get up, it's been an area that GWS have been able to monster us in a little bit over the last few years. I just mentioned Shane Mumford being a prime example of that. But Briggs has also been someone that has really been in some good form and has enjoyed the success that his side have been able to have over the last couple of months. So if he doesn't get up to play, this is where the two ruck combo of Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox can come into effect and have a really big say on the contest. In turn, allow our midfielders to get first use of the football and win those in clearances, which are going to just be so vital to what we're trying to achieve, of course, on Friday night. Are there any types of areas where you feel like we can exploit them in? Their forward line, they've got plenty of options, plenty of scoring options, of course. Their back line's been pretty solid too. We know that Sam Taylor's had a phenomenal season as well, but yeah, where can we potentially try and exploit their game plan and put ours into good use?
I don't know if this has much to do with GWS as a side, but more probably to do with us. And I think it's been our strong point throughout season 2023, and it's on turnover, Nico. I think if we're on top of our game and the turnover aspect, and we can sort of half the contest in the middle and win, half the clearances, I think that's probably going to go a long way for us to setting up the game. And that's what our best footiers look like this year. So I'm looking for, a really clean transition like we saw in that Melbourne game. We were lethal. As soon as we were able to turn the ball over on a half back line, it was almost always resulting in a shot at goal. So I think that's what our best footy looks like, and that's probably one of the main ways that we're going to be able to exploit the Giants.
Yeah, I think breaking even on clearance is going to be a big factor. They look so scary out of the midfield, the way they were able to just dominate Port in the clearance, and it led to so many of their scores. But I think it gets mentioned a bit in the AskPiesNation from a few suggestions, but they come in waves and surges. So I think being able to sort of stop that when it comes and we did it against Melbourne in the qualifying final, be able to stop their run and just hold on to the footy and kind of slow the game down. We don't have to play at a breakneck sort of pace the whole way through. And that's what GWS like, is to play at that breakneck pace. So I think being able to slow the game down when it does get on their terms and shut down their waves of run, that'll be a big factor. Because we've seen in the Saints win they went through in sort of patches, 20 minutes here, and then they'd let the Saints back into it, and then they'd have another 20 minutes. And they did similar against Port Adelaide. They got on that burst, and then Port, they missed a lot of shots, but they almost potentially had a chance to get back into that game because GWS almost invited them back into it. So I think that's where we can exploit them.
And we'll look at some other ways we can beat the GWS Giants, of course, in our AskPiesNation segment very shortly. Well, I'll tell you one thing we have that they don't, and that's a big crowd, and that's what's going to come on Friday night.
You're going to say Nick Dacos.
We'll get to that as well. Yes, that they definitely don't have him either, even though they bid for him in the draft. 106,000 members. A lot of them will be be there on Friday night cheering us on. I know they're coming with the mentality of like, yeah, we're back to our home ground.
Anytime,
MCG,
anywhere.
really can't wait, to perform, but it's a different beast, boys. It's very different beast. They're going to be coming in, even different to 2019 again. Weather's going to be a little bit different. Dry deck.
It's definitely dry, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't want any rain.
I think rain only on Wednesday. Packed house. Tickets already sold out for this game as of a few hours ago. It's going to be an enormous test, and I know that Collingwood's mantra has been about having the 19th man and the role that they've played. We've heard it from players that have been on here and supporters all across how crucial that has been to our wins this year. I don't think that's going to be any different come Friday night, and I think GWS are going to have a lot more than they bargained for when they make their way to the G and run out onto the ground on Friday night.
Well, everyone speaks about the prelim finals being the most pure footy experience from a fan's perspective. It's sort of the last week in the year where the true fans can get along before the corporates take over on grand final day. But I think there's no doubt this 19th man plays, or the 23rd, 4th man, whatever it is these days, Nico, will play a role on Friday night. But, it's hats off to GWS. I mean, they played against a 70,000 strong crowd against St Kilda.
Sorry, Derek.
Sorry to bring this up, Derek. And then to go over, as Luke and I experienced earlier on this year, that Port Adelaide crowd at the Adelaide Oval is a hostile environment, as hostile as it probably gets without being 90,000 of a Collingwood crowd. So they've got to go up another gear, and hopefully, I'm sure I'll be screaming my lungs off, as we will all be. But yeah, it'll definitely play a factor.
Yeah, so I was going to say, as much as it plays in our favour, they're coming off the back of a pretty hostile crowd. So they are going to be used to it, and they have had, I think it was the 11 wins at different grounds this year. So they are experienced at winning at opposition grounds, and obviously that no matter, even at their home ground, when we've played them there, and probably a few of the other big clubs when they've played them there, they're going to be outweighed in the fans department. So they are used to it. So it will be a big factor, but probably not as big as most other games, I would say, because they are used to it in doing it most weeks. But yeah, that Collingwood crowd compared to 2019, it is so different the last couple of years. I think it's just a much more passionate fan base now. Obviously, we all experienced the Buckley days where half the fan base was against each other, but it feels like right now everyone is united on a Collingwood front. So
nice to have that feeling.
It is. So I'm as the Freo final last year was one of the best nights of the footy I've been to, in terms of it was just a nice relaxing win, but to celebrate with pretty much a full Collingwood crowd, I think this Friday will hopefully be pretty similar.
Yes, we do have Nick Dacos. I was getting to him.
Is he playing?
He's absolutely playing. He's fit. He's fine. He's ready to go. Can't wait to see him back out on the field. It's been a while. It's been a long time coming, and that's the other advantage I think we have up our sleeve, that we've got a fit, ready to go Nick Dacos that comes into a final, and with the crowd behind him, I have no doubt that he's going to deliver once again on the big stage.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it, Nico. There's a little glimmer of me that hopes that he's not coming in a little bit underdone. We haven't rushed this because it is a final, but I think that win against Melbourne really has set this up beautifully. Extra, 16 days off or whatever it was for him to really rest up. And all reports is they're not smashing him at training. He's still managing his loads quite well. So I'm not sure what you boys think about this, but I'm not that fussed if he doesn't go into the middle straight away. I think there's an opportunity for him to play that halfback role that quarterback position, as Marcus mentioned so often. I think he plays that to perfection. So I say there's a nice little ease in at halfback in a prelim final week in front of 100,000 people, but that's probably where he's going to find himself, I think.
No, I think it's worked out for the best to have that time without Nick, to show that we can still play without him. He is a godly type player, but we are able to still get the job done without him, and we won't rely on him so much when he is back in there. So it's a nice little thing to go, yeah, he's back and we've got him and we can use him to our advantage. But if opposition teams, and I don't know if GWS are going to target him at all, but if opposition teams do target him, then we can do our other things with the rest of our side. So it will be nice to have him back, and like you said, I think it's timed perfectly. I reckon if it was a semi, we're probably rushing him a little. That extra little break is perfect and gives him, ideally, hopefully, this game to get through, and then perfect for the granny.
Well, it just keeps going back to how important that win against Melbourne was. We'll keep going on about it because it was just crucial to how this is all played out and the advantage that we get. We don't have to travel. We get Dacos an extra week's rest. Unfortunately, what hasn't worked out is Taylor Adams, who went down with an injury at training a few days ago and will miss the preliminary final. Lukey, you made the call already that a grand final spot was in doubt, and we got to hear from him as well, which was great. And hopefully, if we do happen to get to the last day, that he is a possible chance to return to the team. But it's just such a cruel blow for Taylor Adams. We heard him speak so candidly here about the struggles he went through at the end of last year, missing the final series and of course having to get himself back to a point where he was passionate to play mentally, but also get himself to a point physically where he could perform at his best. And he was just starting to get into form at the back end of the season. Unfortunately, he's going to be a player that we're really going to miss against this Giants midfield. And hopefully I'm sure we've got the personnel there that we can take over his influence on the game, but just him not being there, the leadership that he brings to the table, it's going to be a bit of a blow.
Absolutely, and heart goes out to Taya. What a way to do it at training as well, not even on a game situation. So yeah, really do feel for him, especially considering what he's been through. And I think a player like Tay, with his ferociousness and his contested luck play, he's worth his weight in gold in finals. Initially after the game against Melbourne, I didn't think he had a fantastic game, but watching the replay, that's the little things he does, like tackling, getting a hand in when you need to, just hacking a kick out when you need to. In finals, every meter can be a winner, and a bloke like Tay provides that for you. So really feel sorry for him, and sort of bloke that if we do qualify for the grand final this week, you really would like him in, but does he come back in? It just causes even more selection headaches. So really feel sorry for him.
Yeah, he's the type of guy, the bigger the game, the bigger he gets.
Yep.
And I think losing him against this GWS midfield is going to hurt us big time. He's a big loss in that regard. I just going with a hamstring, it's tough to see him getting back for the granny if we do make it. But I do hope he can get through. It sounds like it's on the very, very minor side, and he's already back running. But we spoke to Maxi, and Maxi was in the studio, and he spoke about how the training has kind of changed over the past couple of years with the new conditioning in there, and that you got blokes doing hammies and then running the next day, and that happened with Das, and it's happened with Tay.
Again, yeah.
So we hope that he can get back through. Wish him all the best. It is going to be tough without him out there.
So selection-wise, is it as simple as Adams out, Dacos in, or are there any other tricks up Craig McRae's sleeve? Could we see John Noble potentially return to the starting 22, and if so, who potentially makes way?
Well, to be honest with you, Nico, after my absolute clanger a couple of weeks ago, I feel like I should just completely remove myself from any selection chat. Any time I mention half a debatable name, they end up going out and having an absolute day out. And
well,
I think you never got to explain yourself.
I think you can hear it in my voice. As soon as I make it, I sort of realise what the hell have I just said, and I backtrack immediately. And then Steele goes out, and I thought he was best on against Melbourne. I really did. I thought, the experience came to the fore, and I'm sitting there, and my mate Liam is sitting there the whole time. Every time he touched the footy, I did something right. He goes, "Oh man, he should be." And my phone was blowing up, and I think I'm not on Twitter very often, but I think the feedback I got from Twitter and Lukey's lovely partner Talia as well was quite ferocious and well deserved. So not only do I want to apologise to Steele, but also the wider Collingwood community for that absolute clanger. And I genuinely, as Marcus said, wish I had my time again. But I don't think there'll be any surprises like that this week. Nico, I think it's as simple as unfortunate it is for Tay, it waves all these headaches about selection because Tay goes out and Nick just comes straight back in. And I think that's all that's got to be said. I think the other interesting one is the sub. Who's going to be the sub? Jack Ginnivan was immense last Monday, as you boys touched on in the Melbourne review. But, do we get more out of a Jack Ginnivan coming on with 11 minutes to go, or do we get more out of an Oleg Markov coming on with 11 minutes to go? That's my thinking at the moment. Obviously, again, I probably should just take my name out of the hat for these calls because I've got absolutely no idea. But yeah, that's the interesting one for mine, Lukey.
Yeah, I feel for Jack a little because he probably does deserve to be in there, but who comes out?
I think I'm happy with Jack as a sub right now. that Raw, as we mentioned,
Oh.
when he came on against Melbourne, insane. I don't mind that as being a bit of a spark. Who knows at what point of the game we might be in where he can just come on and just change the wave of momentum. We could be a third quarter where they're starting to come back, the Giants, and it gets to a couple of points and he can come on and have an impact. We could be behind in a game and he's able to turn it on and suddenly we get a bit of ascendancy going forward. I really like that idea. As good as Markov can be in the sub role, I think he did well enough in the qualifying final to keep his spot on that half-back line.
Yeah, the other thing I've read a little is how potentially coming out for Noble. I'm not sure. Just with the thinking with matchups, I haven't delved too deep into the thinking behind it, but it has. I did read someone say Noble was wearing a black Guernsey at training, which everyone wearing black
Jeez,
was.
that's such a conspiracy.
Everyone, I think everyone
Seriously.
wearing black was
Oh,
in the
God.
22 or 23. So
Rubbish.
potentially, I don't think it will happen. I think, it'll be pretty seamless. Adams goes out, Nick in, and that's
And
that.
that's it.
Ginnivan remains the sub, and we try and remain as settled as possible
Yeah.
to get the job done on Friday.
Can I just say as well, whatever team we do pick this week for the game, if we do happen to qualify, just wipe it clean and start again, because that's just I think that's what we got in Melbourne. No one expected John Noble to be dropped. Everyone thought on form for the past since 2020 when he made his debut that he's a walk-up start, but it's just all dependent on who you're playing and the matchups within that game. Nico, you won't like me bringing this up, but I think we played Ben Reid in a prelim final in 2019 in the cold and wet, and we had a bloke like Travis Varco who was made for that game, but we had
Rubbish.
for some reason we had one eye on the following week. So don't get caught in the trap of doing that, and I don't think they will. Again, Fly McRae is very in the now, living in the now, not in the future. So I think that's what they'll do, and we might be having this exact same conversation, fingers crossed, if we qualify this week about who could potentially be facing the Blues or the Lions.
Thanks for bringing my mood down about
Sorry,
10
mate.
notches, Jack. Oh, that's probably the angriest I've ever been when that selection came. That prelim. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. Let's move on. Let's get to AskPiesNation. Let's get straight into how we beat GWS according to the fans. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok. It's just continuing to get those numbers. They're just going through the roof at
That's
the
why
moment.
Jack makes his
All their
outrageous
social
media-
calls.
Yes,
He
social
sees the
media
TikTok.
platforms. That's it.
As much as I spend riffing at Kane Corns, I'm slowly turning into him.
AskPiesNation this week was
Credit to Cornsey though, the last week or so.
Stuck up for us.
About the
Game,
Maynard, yeah.
He was very, and it wasn't like he was being biased towards Collingwood. It just felt like he was speaking it how it was. A lot of people were trying to make kind of a name for themselves in being different, but I felt Cornsey just said it how it
Yeah, he
was.
didn't even mention the fact that he actually is playing. Just in case anyone hasn't heard the news, he did get off and he's
In case you
playing.
didn't see Eddie celebrating at dinner.
That's it,
yeah.
Dale Thomas. Yeah, interesting.
Copped a lot for that as well.
Interesting. Look, just touching on it for about 30 seconds here. Great to see that result come, of course, from a Collingwood point of view. Great to see the news about Brayshaw getting back onto
Yes.
the training track as well.
Yep.
Terrific that he's been able to make progress in that regard. But I think overall, at the end of the day, with all the evidence that was stacked up, it was a pretty clear decision in the end to let Maynard play.
And I think a lot gets lost in the wash, to steal a line from SEN, in these scenarios, because it's the emotion of finals, it's the emotion of a bloke like Brayshaw who has had significant concussions over the course of his career, and something like this is going to impact him significantly. And then it's the emotion of, again, the qualifying final, Braden Maynard, who, as we all love him, I can't imagine he's a loved figure amongst other football clubs. So I think it all sort of, accommodated into this big pot and sort of blew up. But when you really just take all that out of it, as I think Lukey said at the time, when you take all that out of it, you look at the incident for what it was, I think the right result has come to fore. And it was never going to be 3 weeks. I'm really glad that when it got to that stage where it was going to be 3 weeks or none, I think most sensible people would have said it deserves none as opposed to as deserving 3 weeks.
It's amazing how big it got though. People
Yeah,
who don't
huge.
even follow footy were knowing what was going on. It was just insane, and like they just looked at it. Most of them would look at it from a perspective of he's knocked the bloke out, so he has to go for that. But if anyone who knows footy knew that couldn't be any kind of suspension, it was. And it was good. Was it the biomechanist who spoke on how much time Maynard actually had? He had no time to do anything but instinctively protect himself.
Yeah.
And shout out to all the Melbourne fans who are enjoying a nice September now with their straight six.
And I hope they're going as hard for Cozzy Pickett because he laid a
Yeah,
big
bloody
bump on the
oath.
weekend and he got 1 week. So
All right, let's get to AskPiesNation then. Let's move to GWS. Let's get to the GWS
all the loving
theory.
Melbourne supporters.
Of course. And to how we beat them on Friday night. Keen to get some of these thoughts from our lovely AskPiesNation army.
Vaxjo Pies, slow the game, or this is how we beat the Giants. Slow the game right down and play in the trenches. GWS hate getting dirty. They want a fast-paced game. Port lost because they tried to match the speed and they couldn't do it.
Okay, interesting.
Mel's a 5. Bring the same team defence as we played against the Ds and let Bobby Hill off the leash.
Yeah, it's going to be crucial. I think that defence is going to be so important with a side that has so many scoring options. Jesse Hogan does start to worry me a little bit when you can see what he's been able to produce against a second-rate team in Essendon, but then also last week too against Port Adelaide. It was just incredible to watch, and yeah, absolutely someone. Toby Bedford, you mentioned Jake Riccardi, who had a bit of a quieter game, but he's someone that can definitely take the game by the scruff of its neck if need be.
People's Alert 1. Both finals the Giants have played bruise-free footy. Who have they won against that actually brought pressure? The pressure was nowhere at all last night until Port thought they may have some chance. Play our brand in the first half and we should be in control.
Yeah,
I like that, Nico. Bring the pressure. The big crowd gets involved. I think that would put the heat on them immensely.
And them coming off the 6-day break, playing back-to-back games, really
tire
get
'em out, mate.
Yeah, get them early. Connor, that's what Connor says. Exploit the 6-day break versus the 15-day break, and I think that is going to be a huge factor this Friday night. Lucas Garth, win 4 quarters. That happens when you play the minutes. We'll need to be efficient in attack. Relentless. What are you?
I'm laughing.
I tried to remain cool there.
I'm laughing because as true as that is, I also saw a comment on the AskPiesNation this week, Nico, that just said kick more goals than them, and I was like,
Like,
oh,
no
fair
way.
enough.
Cop some hate from
Unbelievable.
Continuing, that happens when you play the minutes. We'll need to be efficient in attack, relentless pressure in the midfield, and stingy in defence. At least we won't have that hubris that we did in 2019 where we tried to win with one 15-minute patch of good footy.
Yeah, we see what happens in finals when teams don't kick accurately. Shout out Melbourne again. And unfortunately, that's what happens. So we need to make sure that we're efficient as we were against the Demons and how we've been in the last few weeks too.
And you don't need to be perfect either. I think the biggest takeaway that I've got from this final series so far, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, Carlton have been exemplifying this. You don't need to be playing perfect footy. Footy isn't as attractive in terms of a skill set as it was maybe 2 to 3 years ago. It is all about territory and it is all about the turnover game. And it's not going to, again, as long as you are good enough inside your 50, you just got to get it down there and that's probably going to win you a premiership.
Yeah. Mick Blair, watching recent games and analysing their play, they come in surges. We need to shut down their momentum with defensive play, not give them the opportunity to command the play style, make it our game. Our defenders are second to none. We can do this.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thorlin, I think the game will be won and lost from each team's half-back. Giants' ability to run and burst off half-back absolutely dismantled Port Adelaide. And their mids absolutely dominated clearances too. Very similar style to us when we're in transition. So if we can stop their run and dash, it'll go a long way to securing the W. Plus 95k faithful in full voice as our 19th man will be huge. Cannot wait for Friday. Let's go, Pies.
And the man that we need to stop doing that exact thing is Lockie Whitfield because he was just unstoppable off half-back against the power. So I think we can quell his influence a little bit too, then that can go a long way to winning.
Dave Elbow, I think having Ginnivan as the sub is worth twofold. For the spark it gives the Magpie Army, we are the advantage.
Yep.
So you mentioned that a little
right.
earlier.
That's okay, yeah. Just great minds.
Carnival King 23, we are undoubtedly the better side if we bring our best. The boys need to make sure we don't let sides wrestle the third quarter away. In particular, I have faith in our back six, but the midfield need to break even with centre clearance and make it difficult to transition the ball through the midfield of the ground. Big night for our mids, and we need a 5-star defensive effort from them.
Yeah, I know we're still a few days away and we have no idea how the game's going to pan out, but it just feels like that third quarter is going to be the make or break term. I know they call it the premiership quarter, and it was that third term where Melbourne were really coming hard at us and we were able to respond with goals of our own to still win the quarter and put ourselves in a really good position in the last to stop whatever was coming our way from the Melbourne midfielders. Feel like that's going to be something that happens again. There's going to be moments, or a moment maybe, in the third term where GWS will bring everything to the table. We need to be good enough to absorb that pressure, and that's going to give us a great opportunity to go on and get the win.
Jacob Merritt 04, the obvious answers like pressure, etc. But where we came unstuck in 2019 is we didn't respect the opposition. GWS wanted it more. We have to show up for 4 quarters. The matchups are crazy on every line. Come on, boys. We aren't done yet.
Yeah, and I feel like as a fan base and probably as a club as well, where we've moved on from that. I think we very much respect what the Giants are all about this year. We very much respect that next week isn't given to us by any stretch of the imagination, regardless if we finish first and all of that. So, I think as a fan base, we know that, the talk is, let's not worry about next week until we get to next week. Let's just focus on this week and give the Giants the due respect that they deserve. And I think the players and Craig McRae will take that on board as well.
Yeah. Jeff Elshaw, I finished with. We've been the best team all year. Simple. Just keep doing what we've been doing.
Gee, there you go.
Done.
If only it was that simple.
And I think that's the
Absolutely.
best thing about us this year is that I feel like no matter who we play, and that's why I wasn't really worried about playing the Giants, because I feel no matter who we come up against, if we are close to our best, if not our best, we're going to win the game. So I'm that confident in our ability.
Best team of the comp for a reason, isn't that right? So let's hope we can do that again on Friday night. We'll take a quick break. Got AFLW to talk about on the other side and a quick wrap up with our weekend headline. Welcome back to the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. Let's move straight into AFLW. Unfortunately, not a win to be talking about from the weekend. We went down to the Gold Coast by 12 points. The first time we've ever lost to the Suns in the AFLW competition. We talked about inaccuracy in the last segment, and that's what happened to the Pies, unfortunately. 2 goals, 9 we finished with compared to Gold Coast's 5-3, and that was the end of the story, really. Brianna Davey was tagged pretty heavily, couldn't really get into the game until the second half, and we just really struggled to get anything going scoreboard pressure-wise. So we're 1 from 3 at the moment, and only a 10-game season. Luke, it's pretty hard to come back from.
Yeah, it looks like we're struggling to move the ball and struggling to get it inside 50 and sort of put that scoring pressure on oppositions at the moment. And outside of probably Britt and Bree, we're missing Ruby Slicer. I don't know on her expected return. She has got a moon boot on at the moment, I've seen, but she has been training, I've seen on Insta. So we need to get her back in. She was probably our best player last year, or at least for the last couple of years. So need to get her back in. But yeah, struggling a little at the moment. And yeah, need to get it going quickly because it is a quick and short season. It sort of ends before it starts.
Yeah, when it's a short season like that, Jack, it does make it a bit difficult to build momentum. But hopefully an opportunity this week. We take on the Saints, who haven't won a game themselves. And that one is this Sunday, 3:05.
There you go. Get down. Whereabouts, Nico?
Great question.
It's at their home.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
RCA.
Moorabbin.
Yeah.
I'll
Moorabbin,
take a stab at it. But yeah, hopefully that's a momentum booster we can grab to get ourselves back on track. There's still time to turn it around. I know it is only a short season, but yeah, fingers crossed we can get the wins going again and hopefully get some momentum from the boys as well to get that win on Friday night. Before we wrap up, we do like to do a weekend headline, but before I get to that, one question I did have for you boys from what this preliminary final will have in store for us. Who is one player from our team that needs to stand up and have a massive final?
Well, it's often forgotten 2019 he didn't play because of the injury that has subsequently left him having to wear protective eyewear. Nico, he didn't have Mason Cox in that 2019 prelim, and I'm looking for some prelim Mason Cox action this week. He usually stands up in these big games. Probably he'll be dirty on himself last year. I think in that game against Sydney, he probably had a bit of a quiet one, but I think this week it's all set up for him. Big crowd. I thought he was brilliant against Melbourne. Probably the difference, especially setting the tone early against someone like Max Gawn, who still went on to have a great game. But he brings a physicality. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. If he takes a couple of big marks inside 50 and kicks some goals, that'll be, putting his best foot forward to get the Magpie Army up and about. So, yeah, looking for a big final from Big Mace.
What about you, Luke?
He loves a big final.
He does.
Coxie. Mine's mixed day, I think. We've seen, I guess, a glimpse in the qualifying final where he sort of got it really going for 5 minutes there and stopped Melbourne in their tracks when they were coming. I want to see that across a bit more of the game. And I think that's what he can deliver. We brought him over on some pretty big coin. We've got to this point of the year and it's sort of been what's hurt us in previous runs towards the premiership is not having that big key forward in our forward line. And although we don't rely on him, I think it's going to play a pretty important factor over the next couple of weeks. Having a functioning forward line, and if Dan McStay can get off the chain a bit, I think that goes a long way to for helping our cause.
I agree with everything you said, which is why I went Brody Mychek as that player, because I feel like Sam Taylor's going to go to Dan McStay on Friday night, and Taylor, we know he's been in outstanding form, did a pretty good job on Charlie Dixon on the weekend, so you feel like Taylor's opponent straight away will be McStay. That just gives Mychek that opportunity to be the forward that we need to spark some things going. We know the small forwards can play a big role, and that Bobby Hill and Bo McCroon, and when he comes on the field, Jack Ginnivan will play crucial roles, but I think it's time for Brody Mychek to stand up in another big final and deliver. I reckon he can kick 3+ this weekend and really set the tone and just highlight what this forward structure has been for us this year. It's been so important to have all those players contributing, not just in the forward line, but in the midfield. And I think if Mychek can get on the chain early, it's going to make for a really good final for him. So hopefully Brody Mychek can deliver. Let's go through our weekend headline then. Friday night, as we know, massive preliminary final at the G. Where have you lent towards it with this one, Jack?
Well, it's a bit of a headline and a sub-headline and leading on from my who needs to have a big final, Nico. But is it a presidential election or is it a prelim final? I think the USA chants are going to be ringing across the MCG this week, sending the Pies into a grand final berth. So we're looking forward to that from Big Mesa.
And mine's a little follow-up from my big player who needs to have a big final. McStay quells the Giant surge, as we've spoken a little bit about in AskPiesNation. The surges the Giants go on. I think McStay can quell that surge when it does come, and he'll kick 4+, and the Pies will get up by 20+.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. I think there's a big reason why we can get a huge result, and I'm going to say that Quainer keeps green goals. If that happens, you might as well take it to the bank, I think. And I know you said you don't want to be Toby Green centric, but he is their barometer. He is someone that can turn the game on its head, and when he gets on top early, he's very hard to stop. So I think if our defence can put at least a fair bit of pressure onto him in the early stages, try and make him build his own confidence back, which we know he can, but when you've got 90,000 people against you, it's always a very hard thing to do, even on the biggest of stages. So if you can shut him down early, it's going to be a big say as to how we get this win.
It will be, Nico. And I mentioned before that I feel like we as a fan base and a club have moved on from having one foot in the door of grand final day. But if you are the sort of person who's just going to spend this whole week talking about grand final week, don't. I don't usually believe in mozzing or juju or whatever it is, but just don't do it. Just don't speak about it. We'll save it for when we do make it, if we do. Just focus on the prelim final, for God's sake.
Oh gosh.
I've spoken about planning for the grand final, but
you sort of have to. A little bit of it does.
I'm not expecting us just to be there, because we know how hard it is to get there, and we've had our prelim heartbreaks in the past few years. So everything to play for on Friday night, and GWS are definitely no easy beats. They're probably the toughest team to beat out of the remaining 4 at the moment. So it's going to be a huge game, and I'm bloody pumped.
All right.
Carlton supporters have already booked in their tabs on grand final night at the Lygon Street, Nico.
I hope they all get stuck in Queensland. That's how much.
Here's a Monday headline.
Go on.
Brisbane knock off Carlton by 50+.
Come on the Lions.
Let's hope.
It'll be over at quarter time.
Oh, mate, music to my ears, Luke. Music to my ears. Let's hope that happens. And let's hope it's the Pies that are able to get things done at quarter time.
Then it does get scary against Brisbane if we do face them.
Well, let's get to that.
We're not worried about it.
Jack's already about to crack it. All right, well, that's all we got time for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed the preview of our big preliminary final. Be sure to get involved in all our social media pages: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, or podcasts, TikTok, everywhere. It's going to be Collingwood-centric again. We need every supporter we can to cheer us on, and hopefully we can get to the grand final, and we're talking about it in a week's time. But until next week, Jack and Luke, thank you boys for stopping by.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nico. Thanks for having me back.
Look forward to Friday.
I've been your host, Nicholas Sacco. You've been listening or watching to the Pies Nation podcast, where the Pies are hot and the drinks are cold.